Good morning, John. Earlier this week, when I started to see images of deportation raids in Los Angeles, and then protests and pushback against ICE and violence and vandalism beginning to break out, I got mad. I just felt like this was going exactly wrong. My government was violating people's rights and being inhumane, and the most visible response was burning Waymos. To paraphrase a video I made over on Hank's channel where I make this case in much more detail, the Trump team is very good at widening rifts in society and capitalizing on that chaos. If they can infringe on people's rights faster than the courts can hold them accountable, then people will try to stop them, and that will create conflict. And everyone knows that one burning car is going to get 100,000 times more media coverage than tons of peaceful protests. So I was feeling kind of hopeless and frustrated and angry and a little bit like there was nothing at all that I could do against the inevitability of it all. Like, we've set the pieces in motion and here is what will happen. Trump's insistence that due process doesn't matter and Americans' insistence that it does is going to create a conflict in the real world, and that's going to end up, if nothing else, delivering more power into the hands of Donald Trump. And I even mentioned my thoughts here to somebody, and they were like, yeah, but like, who knows how this is actually going to go? And I said, I know exactly how it's going to go. But no, I don't. I want to talk a little bit about how I get to hope when I'm feeling hopeless. Starting with the fact that hopelessness is usually the less rational position. It's just the one that my brain, with its limited capacity for dealing with everything all at once, is presenting to me because it can't imagine the actual infinite and bizarre world that we live in. So that's one way. I just try and remember that all of the times in my life when I have felt hopeless, there has been hope, I just haven't been able to feel it. But before we go on to the rest of it, real quick, one thing about going for a dumb little walk for my dumb little brain is that it looks really stupid when I do it while looking at my phone, which is like the first thing I would suggest, and often the hardest thing to do, is just, if you can, get out of the place where you are experiencing the hopelessness and go to a different place. But another thing is what my friend said to me, and what I later said to a friend who asked me how I have hope in times that feel hopeless, and it is simply this: a hard to believe thing that is definitely true. No one has any idea what the future is going to be like, especially when it comes to something as complicated as like a nation. You can make the case that this strategy is very good, which I did in my video on Hank's channel. You can make the case that it's barely a strategy at all, and that it's just driven by the whims and worldviews of people who are not acting strategically, and in fact it's going to be quite bad for them in the long term. Which, there's a video in the description from Jamel Bowie doing exactly that. Or you can make the case that how this goes is going to depend on how people act throughout it. Imagine that! But there's also something else that I've been looking toward, and this is going to sound bonkers, especially coming from me, but there's this concept in Taoism. It's sometimes called non-action. My preferred translation is effortless action, because it is definitely still action. The simplest metaphor here being, it's very easy to spend an awful lot of time like shoving on a wall, trying to push it over, when you're basically spending no energy just looking for a door. And when I think about this the way that I am asked to think about it, that what can I do and the action I can take and how do I control the narrative, and there's so many I's in this sentence, that's what I'm being asked, is like, how do we play the chess move correctly? How do we twist somebody's arm behind their back? How do we 4D chess our way into the outcome that we want? This is an illusion. I do believe this is an illusion. The Taoist way of looking at this takes this another step, and it says all of this stuff, all of this pushing and pulling and shoving and trying to control things is just pushing everything further away from the natural harmonious path. And you will always inevitably, ultimately end up at the natural harmonious path. I'm simplifying and probably also getting this wrong, but I don't think that there's like one natural path that we're all gonna like land upon. I think what we do matters, and I think even if we did have like a place that we were all gonna land, it would still matter, because suffering now matters now. But there's something to it, and like the obvious something is that when I am like reacting to what's going on in the news, it's pretty easy to lose sight of what I actually care about. I think a lot of my frustration and hopelessness and anger at the beginning of this week was less about my worry for people and was more about my frustration that a guy who I don't like is implementing a strategy that I see both as inhumane and as likely to deliver him more power, and thus feel to him like a win. I know that I shouldn't care about that specific thing, but I do, and it's one big reason why I am uncomfortable in this moment, where we've got a guy who didn't get powerful in spite of the fact that he's like rude and crass and manipulative and deceitful, has no allegiance to the truth at all, and has obliterated even our expectation that the truth matters, and is, like narcissistic and kind of the leader of the cult of himself. He's powerful in part because of all that stuff, not in spite of it, because of it. And it's easy to focus on that, just like it's easy to focus on the burning Waymos, because I'm a human and I'm drawn to that kind of thing, to that interpersonal conflict, to that act of destruction. But I'm also more than just that, and so I can recognize that stuff is just shoving on a wall. It's like being shown a wall and pushing on it. When theoretically, just as easily, I could be focusing on people who need care, what I want to see in the world, how we find community, what we love and build and discover while we're here. And that can look like so many things. It can look like conversation, it can look like protest, it can look like community building, it can look like a book club. And of course, in all that does create a story, it creates a narrative. And above all, that story is about humans and their humanity. There's this TikTok I saw that used the phrase, humanize before they can militarize. Because militarization is so easy once dehumanization occurs. And dehumanization is a somewhat natural human reaction. And so we have to build against it. And the most powerful tool for dehumanization is our fear of each other. And of course, the people who try and get us to invest more in that fear, to feel that fear more, is their motive power, or is it dehumanization, or are those two things basically the same thing? If we act out of hope and out of a vision for what we'd like to see the world be like, then that is a humanizing act. Acting out of hope is humanizing, acting out of fear is dehumanizing. So all that stuff that I just talked about, so I don't have the script in front of me, so I can't tell you what I just said. All that stuff to me is no longer pushing against a wall. It is trying to understand the whole shape of the building. And as any ant will tell you, there's always a way in. John, I'll see you on Tuesday. Also, sorry it was so loud. Everybody, John and I just had a call with Partners in Health about the state of things. And among all of the state of things is the fact that we have raised the $50 million that it takes to open the Maternal Center of Excellence in Sierra Leone, to build it and to run it for, not forever, but to get it running. About a third of that money was raised by Partners in Health. About a third of it was donated directly by people from this community, either in one-time donations or recurring donations. And the final third was mostly the profits of Good.Store. When we signed on to raise that amount of money, we had no idea how we were going to do it. But a bunch of individual people made choices about how they wanted the world to look, and now that's real. So now forever, that can be another thing that I can touch back on if ever I need some hope.